Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Hello, Kim. What's today's first topic to discuss?
So the first thing that we wanted to talk about today was appropriate serving temperature of your wines. This is a question that we get often, whether it's for serving wine at home or in a restaurant or in a party. And there are some rules of thumb, and we wanted to clarify a few things about what people should be doing about serving their wine at the appropriate temperature for that kind of wine.
Yeah, this article, the source of the article is USA Today Network, and they did a good job of picking out whites and red temperatures. One of the things I always like to say is, or reference temperature to, is room temperature. They always say wine should be consumed at room temperature. Now, years ago when this statement came out, the room temperature is a lot different than room temperature today. I always joke with people that my house, my wife, room temperature is 90 degrees. So you have to be careful when serving things at room temperature.
And really, when they came up with this idea of quote unquote room temperature, they were really talking about like old world European room temperature, which is a whole lot cooler than we usually keep our houses here in the States. So room temperature for reds really should be served somewhere between the 60, 65 degree mark. And we then tend to think of that as pretty cool room temperature, but that's really where most red wines are going to show their best.
Yeah, and the higher the room temperature, the more that affects the alcohol of the wine. So the alcohol will start evaporating. You'll get different effects. A red wine will become more bitter if it's hotter at temperature. In white wines, we often serve white wines at tastings at room temperature just to get them more aromatic, but I think people tend to chill them way too much. Mm-hmm. Your opinion on that?
Or put ice cubes in them.
Yeah.
Which sometimes, depending on the quality of the wine, might actually not be a bad thing. You know, there's something about adding that extra little bit of temperature to a wine that really shows kind of all of its flaws. So if you have a better quality wine, you know, you go ahead and serve that wine a little bit warmer. But if you have something that maybe isn't as good of a quality and you want to hide that a little bit, go ahead and serve that colder than you ordinarily would, because then it's just going to be a little bit more refreshing and sort of hide some of those flaws.
That's a great point. I mean, temperature either way can hide things or mask things. What's your opinion on white wine in general?
White wine in general, as far as serving temperature?
Yes.
I honestly probably serve them a little too cold. The rule of thumb is serve them somewhere around 55 degrees. I like mine just a little bit colder than that, but for me, whites and rosés, you know, people are looking for something that is refreshing. They're looking for something that's hopefully going to go with their lighter foods. So that cooler temperature, I think, is what people are looking for.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that whites at 50, it's the refrige. You take wines out of the fridge, your fridge is at 40, right. 38.
Right.
So a lot of times people say 20 minutes before you serve it, take it out. And with reds, 20 minutes
Vice
in the
versa,
fridge.
right. Put your red wines in the refrigerator.
I never do that with my reds, honestly.
I do that with my lighter reds.
Yeah, you put them in the fridge. And
I do. I'll serve things like Pinot Noir, things like Beaujolais. I'll serve them a little bit colder. And especially at some of my wine events, what I'll do, or my wine tastings, every once in a while, I will put that bottle of red wine, even if it's a regular heavy red wine, into my bucket full of ice and ice water, just to keep it at a little bit of a cooler temperature, because you don't want it getting above that 65, 68 degree mark and coming up to true American room temperature, because then that also, you know, that's the other side of it. Then those red wines are not going to show as well. So at the exact same way that if you have those white wines that are served too cold, if you have red wines that are served too warm, they're really not going to be tasting their best.
Yeah, and the key with those red wines you mentioned, they're very light red wines, so they can take that little chill. If you do that with Cabernet or Zinfandel,
right,
the cold will just bring out the tannins.
It's all about
really
those tannins.
Bitter. Yeah, so I mean, it is a good idea, especially in hot months. Give a red a little chill. You don't want to be sipping on a hot red wine. It really defeats the purpose.
Hot Cabernet.
And as far as the whites, I think we get good feedback when we do events and people come in and things are pre-poured and they're at so-called room temperature, because the whites really In the reds too, people walk in a room where there's a tasting, it's very aromatic, and that's due to the wines coming up to a temperature and releasing the aromatics. So I think we get good feedback with that temperature.
I would say that for that rule, I would prefer to break it for sparkling wines. Like I like my bubbly to be really cold, and I think most people do, and that is a general good way to go. You know, make sure that your sparkling wines are kept well chilled. Because they will taste better.
The main thing with the sparklings colder is to keep the pressure down.
You don't want those exploding bubbles.
If you've never experienced, you'll know if the sparkling wine is too warm, because the pressure will build up and just explode on you when you open it. So it's not fun. I've gone through that a few times, unfortunately.
Yeah, so have I. People also ask us, what's the best way to chill down a wine? If you need a cold bottle and you don't have a cold bottle, what do you do about it? It's like, do you put it in the freezer? Do you put it in the refrigerator? The best way to chill down a bottle of wine is in a mixture of ice and water. And you're looking for actually more water than ice. So an ice water bath is going to chill something probably 4 times faster than putting it in the refrigerator.
Yeah. Do you see, it's interesting because I noticed lately buying whites in a restaurant, they tend to take them from a fridge and put them more in a ceramic vessel or a cooling vessel, but not with liquid any longer. Have you noticed that?
I've seen that too. And as long as those, and I have a couple of these at home, they look like marble, and they retain the cold really well. So if those are stored in the freezer or stored in the refrigerator, then they keep the wines fairly well chilled. And I don't know if that has to do, if the way that restaurants are changing the way that they're serving it. It might honestly just be a mess factor.
Yeah, it could be presentation.
If you don't have a big drippy bottle of Chardonnay that you're pulling out every once in a while to top off everybody's glasses, that makes a little bit of a nicer presentation.
Yeah, presentation of the labels, it's not dripping all over your table. True. And they'll pour it for you. It is a presentation thing. What about one of the other common things we hear is, how do you store it before you serve it? And a lot of times people have these nice little racks in their kitchen sitting on the counter, and it's really bad to keep them.
The kitchen is really not the best place to store your wine. You know, we hear some people, I store it next to the refrigerator, or I store it above the refrigerator, or I store it on the bar. If you're storing your wine in an area that has just room temperature constantly, or warmer, if it's the kitchen, what with cooking and appliances and things going on, you are impacting how long that wine is going to live. So you are aging that wine in an unnaturally fast way.
Yeah, and the temperature is probably rising much more than room temperature because of the devices around it. Right. So be careful how you store it. And if you like a wine, the other thing is, if you personally like putting ice cubes in your wine, that's the way you drink the wine. Just be aware that sometime maybe don't put the ice cubes in it. Let it warm up just a little bit and see if you notice a difference when you taste, and you might like it at a different temperature. Maybe. But explore it. If it's your regular wine every day, explore it at different temperatures and then see what you think.
Yeah, it'll give you a new perspective on what wines taste like at a colder temperature versus at a warmer temperature.
So try different temperatures and let us know what you think about that.
Welcome back, and you are listening to The Wonderful World of Wine with Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone. Today, one of our topics, we wanted to talk about the newly expanding Israeli wine market, and there are really some wonderful wines that are coming out of Israel these days, and there are some misconceptions between what is an Israeli wine versus what is a kosher wine. Are they the same thing? Are there differences? And we just wanted to get some information out about these newer wines that are hitting the market.
Yeah, the source of this was 750 Daily, which is a kind of a distributor's use of liquor industry articles. But I was really opened up to this in a few ways, Kim, because back in 2016, Wine Spectator did a whole feature about upcoming regions in the world, and Israel was the region they focused on, and it opened my eyes, not only with this article, but I had a vendor that came in and specializes in wines from the region, and my whole idea in thinking about Israeli wines was the kosher movement, and that was, my mind was blown away, but they do grow tremendous amount of, I think it's 40 different varietals, so they're growing all international varietals, and the kosher thing is kind of to the side to them. They just want to produce good wine.
Right, and it's it's interesting looking at what makes a wine kosher and what makes a wine non-kosher, and there are definite markets that are looking for specific kosher certification specifications. But the interesting thing for me, having done a number of kosher tastings with people for around the Jewish holidays and just people who want to learn a little bit more, is that there actually are two designations of kosher wines, and the area of the world that they come from really doesn't have anything to do with that. So you could have kosher wines from Israel, you have kosher wines from America, you have kosher wines from Italy. There are some that are wonderful.
Are you saying kosher being the two designations, kosher for Passover and just kosher?
It's different. So there's kosher for Passover, there's kosher, and then there is another level of kosher wine called mevushal. And this is what people think about, I think, when they are thinking about like Manischewitz wine. What happens with the mevushal ones is that the wines themselves undergo a flash pasteurization, which makes them able to be handled by non-Orthodox observing Jews, or people who are not Orthodox observing Jews are able to handle those wines, pour them, enjoy them with other people, and they still retain their kosher designation.
So that would be entry-level wines.
They end up being the entry-level wines, I think, because of that heat treatment, and it does affect the quality of the wine a little bit. But if you are looking for a wine to serve at a holiday, and you might have people at your table that maybe are Reform Jews or maybe aren't Jews at all, and you want to serve a kosher wine and you want it to retain that kosher designation, you need to go with a mevushal wine. Because if you have a kosher wine that you've got people that you're serving that with, that it's important to them that it is kosher, and there certainly are people and communities out there that is important to them. If that wine has been handled by somebody who is not Jewish, that loses its kosher designation. So it's sort of a slippery slope when you start talking about who has made the wine, who has imported the wine, who has put that bottle of wine on the shelf, who has opened it in a restaurant. And for people who that is an important thing that they want to stick to, then you're really looking at that mevushal category, because it opens up the wine to being able to be imported and sold in establishments that are not run by Orthodox Jews.
And they have symbols they put on the labels to help you figure out which is which style. And it was interesting to me, this article touched on it. As a retailer, I have been categorizing these wines in a kosher section.
Right.
Just a kosher section, not an Israeli section. So,
and I think that's typical. I don't think that you are out of the ordinary doing that. I think most stores will do that, or restaurants will have a kosher section on their, on their wine list. And what it seems to be that we're seeing is that a lot of these Israeli producers are saying, no, have a separate Israel selection. You've got wines from Argentina, you've got wines from Chile, New Zealand. Have one from Israel, because we're just as good of a wine producing area as these other places are.
Yeah, and then the consumer would relate to Israel as a kosher option. So, I mean, that whole instance, it opened my eyes to where I marketed on the retail shelf. So I put an Israeli cab with my Cabernet, but I did have a lot of non-Israeli kosher wine.
Right.
So, and like you said before, the traditional years ago was, Manischewitz to celebrate the holidays.
Right.
And it was a few years back where I actually had a customer point out to me that not most of it, but there are versions of Manischewitz that are kosher, but not certified kosher for Passover.
Correct.
There's two different versions. So It's always good to keep up on that. And this article brought a lot of great points. But the main thing I got out of it's another up-and-coming region in the wine world we have to watch out for. They're making nice Cabernet. They're actually making Moscato. So there's a lot to look.
I've certainly had some very nice Moscatos from Israel, and those reds, they really show beautiful fruit. And, it's nice to be seeing regions that have a lot of history, but we haven't necessarily seen them in the modern winemaking movement, and it's good that they're available here in the States for us too.
Welcome back to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. If you have any questions for us in the future, please send them to us on our Facebook page at The Wonderful World of Wine. Our next topic is going to be France, a Vintage Report 2017. The source of this was the Wine Spectator. And this was very interesting because they've been having a lot of climate problems there this year, Kim.
Yeah, it's been a tough year for France. Happened at the beginning of the season was there were a number of of regions that were impacted very heavily by frost in the spring. And it came at the absolute worst time, just as the berries and the flowers were on vines. So
April.
a lot of, it was April. So a lot of the future crop was destroyed by this hit of frost. So Bordeaux lost a lot. The Loire Valley did too. And then it was a particularly hot summer in a number of different places too. So you end up having less fruit, but really concentrated fruit. So most of the places that have less of a crop this year, they're hoping that the quality will make up for it. But sometimes you just can't make up for losing half of what you expect to harvest in a particular year. So this does happen. We're dealing with wine, which is an agricultural product. And a lot of the time, winemakers still these days are at the hands of what happens from Mother Nature. So sometimes it's just one of those things you have to deal with.
It was really interesting reading. They say, like you were saying, 50% less crop due to the weather, but the quality of the crop is great. Mm-hmm. So, they're saying the worst maybe since 1945.
Yeah.
And production will be down. But my question to you, which there's things called vintage reports that come out every year. Wine Spectator is one of the people who put it out, and they rate a year. So my question to you, Kim, is when this vintage 2017 gets rated, if the quality of the fruit is good, but the production is low, will they rate it a good year?
I think they will, because most of that is based on what the wine in the bottle tastes like, or the wine in the barrel tastes like.
That's interesting, because they had a horrible year,
right?
But the quality was still good. So even though production is low, they still win out in a way, because it can drive up pricing. Yep. So what they lose in volume, they gain in quality, and they can maintain profit, I would assume, from this.
And a lot of French wineries will keep back a number of vintages so that they can continue to sell those just in case they have a vintage like this, which happens at least once a decade and sometimes more often than that. So for Bordeaux, for example, if they don't have a lot of entry-level 2017 wines that they can sell that will hit our shelves in the $10 to $20 range, they have some held back from 2015. They have some held back from 2016. So you'll be seeing that the gaps will be covered by those vintages, and then they'll just hopefully move on to a better year in 2018.
Yeah, and they did give, I saw numbers saying they'll be down about 40 million cases because of it.
Crazy to think about the numbers.
From 2016 vintage to be down that many million, all throughout France, and all in the news lately. There's been issues everywhere. Champagne had frosts, and they do have means to prevent frost, but sometimes they just can't predict it and to prevent it. So it's sad to see what happens when things hit, and we always hear about rain at the worst times affects the fruit, but frost as it's developing was the key thing I was taking out of this is what happened.
Hello, you've been listening to The Wonderful World of Wine with Mark and Kim. And right now we want to talk about an article that we found in Business Insider. It gave a little bit of information on if you are trying to be healthy, what are some of the healthier alcoholic beverages that you could be consuming if you still wanted to consume alcohol as part of a healthy lifestyle. What was your main takeaway from this one, Mark?
Well, as always, dealing with alcohol, we have to stress moderation is key. And I always say this, that you can always find something good about an alcoholic beverage, healthy wise, and something bad. Key, I thought for this, there was 6 beverages that they listed. 3 of them were wine. So that's what I want to talk about. The other 3 were tequila, rum, and whiskey. But let's talk about the 3 wines they listed.
Usually when people are talking about healthy drinking or being able to incorporate alcohol into your healthy lifestyle, usually the first thing that people will talk about is red wine. And there is some science to back up the fact that there are things in red wine that are good for you. The alcohol generally is what is considered the bad thing for you. So again, that moderate drinking, you don't want to drink too much or binge drink. But for red wines, the thing that has the health benefits science is finding are these things called polyphenol, and there's resveratrol, and there are all of these chemical compounds that are found in the skins of the grape that are either good for your heart or good for your blood pressure or good for other things for your body. So I thought it was interesting that in this list, they not only list red wines, but they also list rosé wines, which has a lot of the same benefits that they are pulling from the skins of the grapes, because rosé is a little bit of a hybrid red wine, white wine, because it starts its life as a red wine, where you get contact between the juice and the skin skins. And so the wine itself is pulling some of those beneficial chemical compounds from the skins.
Yeah, so resveratrol, the red wine, we've seen studies going way back on this. There was a 60 Minutes thing years ago that brought it to light. And then they would come out and say, well, you'd have to drink, if you just had resveratrol, they were coming out in a pill form, you'd have to take so much of it to get, to build up this tolerance. Locally, UMass did a study on resveratrol saying that it slowed down the glucose building up in your bloodstream. I was trying to, medically understand it, but that's the idea that there's something good they look at for it. So I may have a good health benefit for someone because of that. And you mentioned the rosé, the skins do touch the grapes, and the health benefit of that, they were saying health for your heart, which is a very common thing you read about wine being good for you involved.
And the other interesting wine one that came up here was champagne. And this is actually from a relatively recent study. And what people are thinking is that it's the extended contact that the champagne has with the dead yeast cells. Because the way that traditional quality true champagne is made, it takes years to produce a bottle of champagne because the aging process is so long. So that champagne will spend a lot of its life just sitting in a bottle with the dead yeast sitting on it. And it creates not only really wonderful flavor and aromatic compounds, but that there is some research to show that those compounds then have a positive health benefit. And a lot of the studies have been looking at memory, and that champagne consumption and people who consume champagne protected in some ways from dementia, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it just brings up the point again that you can always find
something good.
And, then in the Champagne Bureau can jump on this as a marketing. I should definitely look into that because my memory is horrible. But also with champagne, they said it's good for your skin, your quality of your skin, which I thought was an interesting point.
I thought that was
something
interesting
different
too.
angle.
I wonder why.
Yeah, there's always something you can find that's good. Always, I refer back when doing an event one time, and the instructor said he just stopped everybody. He said, we provide with alcohol in a way a really healthful means for people to enjoy. It does me personally. Since I've been tasting wine, I've been, thank God, healthy. And I don't know if it's related, but I'll use it. I think my doctor, I don't know when you go to your doctor, but they ask, do you drink? I said, well, I taste a lot. I don't know what they consider moderation as far as tasting, but we deal with that all the time.
And we, when we go to these big industry wine tastings, we spit out a lot of wine. So we're not consuming an ounce here, an ounce there. A lot of it is leaving our system, thankfully. As people who appreciate wine and who try to incorporate wine into a healthy lifestyle, I probably drink more than my doctor would like me to. As being a relatively small person, my wine consumption is recommended to be less than some other people. I'm only 5'2", but incorporating it into not only a healthy lifestyle, but we try to eat a Mediterranean diet, and traditionally folks that live around the Mediterranean do have wine as a component in that diet. So it kind of, for me, all goes hand in hand. And if you are enjoying yourself and you're enjoying your meal and you're enjoying your life, and wine is a part of that, I see that as improving one's health as well, even if it's your mental health and not necessarily just your physical health.
Yeah, so just the key is moderation. Moderation, explore different things and see how it affects you, hopefully in these health.
And stay hydrated. You have been exploring the wonderful world of wine with Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone. We invite you to visit our Facebook page at The Wonderful World of Wine. Leave us your comments and what you think, and any topics of conversation that you would like us to explore in the future.